There we go. Okay, this is a 1965 Kenworth W900. In 1971, I went to work for the company that owned this truck, and at that time it had a number right there that said 546. It had a sister truck, 545. Now, here's the deal. Back then, you didn't learn to drive a truck from a book written by a fucking lawyer. You learned to drive a truck from the guys that have been doing it for the last 30 years. And what they'd do is they'd take a new guy like me and they'd pair him up with an old guy like Ted Curtis or Ed Haller, and we would watch them for a couple of trips, and then they would let us try it for a couple of trips. And once they signed off and said, yep, you know, this guy can handle the job, well, they'd turn me loose with one of these here trucks, and I'd go out and make some money for them and myself. It just happens that the first time I ever hauled a load for that outfit, the very first time they turned me loose by myself to solo a load, it was in this exact fucking truck. Number 546, Fedderly Marion Freight Lines, Bellevue, Washington. Well, like I said, this is a W900. These things came out in the early 60s. It was a change, a major change on the cab. And it's one of the toughest cabs in the industry. They don't fall apart. They don't get shook apart. They don't start splitting apart at the fucking aluminum welds like certain other kinds of trucks. So it's a wonderful, strong, heavy-duty cab. But the problem is, for a guy that's 6'2", it's vilely uncomfortable. And we're going to get into a different video about why I hate fucking W900 so much. But we're here to get this thing started. It hasn't run for about 6 or 7 years. And we've got starter and series parallel switch problems that we have not been able to run to ground yet. So we're going to go ahead and do some wiring and fucking around and maybe change the starter and a few things like that. And we're going to get this thing to at least crank over. And then we're going to see why the pump doesn't seem to want to pump the diesel fuel up into the injectors. So we will check back with you in a few minutes after we get into this work. Bye now. Bye. Well, here's our hero with the butt crack disease, and he is checking. Yeah, he wants to be a plumber when he grows up. He's checking to see if we got any green water in that radiator. Well, you know what? Okay, we're going to see if 546 will run. And first we're going to spin it with a compression release pulled so that we can see if we can get some oil pressure. And as soon as he sees oil pressure, he's going to release the compression release. Aren't you?
Yes.
Good man. Go ahead and see what happens. No, that ain't cutting it. So we had a horrible time with the 24 volt starter and the series parallel switch, and we went through this, that, and the other bunch of fucking bullshit. Put a new series parallel switch on it because the other one was full of water and all corroded up. We couldn't get the damn thing to crank. So it just so happened I had a Nippon Denso takeoff starter that had aged out. It was one of these outfits that they changed them every so many years so they wouldn't have a problem. But anyway, we put this 12 volt starter in there and it seems to crank just fine. So now, Mr. Duggar, who is sitting in the cab proudly because this is his truck now, he is going to try to start it. He's going to push the clutch down because we don't want that load from the transmission. And he's going to turn on a key and he's going to start cranking, and we're going to see what happens. Okay. Let me see if anything's coming out of the stack. Go ahead and crank it again. No. Okay. There's no fuel coming out of it. Your beer just spilled. Look at that. This guy wasted a perfectly good fucking can of beer. Oh, that's what you get. Okay, we're going to turn that fuel pump on manually. You guys that play with these old Cummins, I'll show you how to do it. Right on the end of that fuel solenoid, if you'll see, there is a little knurled bolt. It's a valve. And you turn it in as if you're turning it off, but that turns the thing on. We do have juice there when the key is on, but maybe the solenoid is stuck. So I have opened the fuel valve. Go ahead and try it again, Keith. We're not getting any fuel to this thing yet. And believe it or not, I did find my tubing wrenches. So that's a tubing wrench. It's a lot heavier duty than a regular wrench. And what we've done is right there, there's a fitting on top of that solenoid, and we've loosened it. So we're going to have him crank it right now and see if we get some fuel squirting out of there. Go ahead. Okay, there's no fuel squirting out of there, so we're going to have to get some compressed air and put it in that tank, and we're going to have to pump it up there from the tank with some compressed air. So we'll get back to you in a little bit.
That's what I used to put over the fuel cap.
Hey, that's pretty fucking smart, man.
There it goes.
Look at that fuel tank gasket that he used. Pump air in there. Yeah, what we ended up doing was cracking this fuel inlet line and had him blow air into the fuel tank until we got all the bubbles in this a straight shot of fuel. Now we know we got fuel to the gear pump, and he's going to crank it some more, and we're going to see if it starts squirting out that other fitting. Go ahead. Well, I don't see any fucking love here, man. Something ain't fucking right. Give it some throttle while you're doing that. Well, we're going to have to go to plan C here. Find out why the fuck that pump isn't pumping. So we'll do a little figuring here and a little fucking around, and we'll get back to you. Well, we've been trying to figure out how to get this thing to turn over. We've had a lot of problems. We had a 24 volt starter in there to begin with, and we found that the series parallel switch was full of water and corroded. So we cleaned that fucker up, put it back in, still couldn't get it to turn over. What was happening was we get 24 volts to the starter from the series parallel switch, but as soon as we engaged the starter, it dropped to about 9 volts. So we had a leak somewhere, or a bad connection somewhere. So what we did is we took the series parallel switch out of the system, and we connected the batteries in series directly to the starter, bypassing everything else except the solenoid on the starter itself. Well, it still would not crank. It still dragged the voltage down to less than half of what it was. So here's the starter we just took out, These are nasty things to put in and out because they weigh about 80 pounds. And they're in an awkward position. And Keith here, the proud owner of this vehicle, is really good at getting those in and out. It's like they got a zipper on them when he's doing the job. So, after we fucked with the 24 volt starter for a while and put a new series parallel switch on it and had no luck, didn't change a thing, we had a 12 volt starter laying around and we put that on there and it took right off and spun the engine just fine several times until it started grinding and would no longer engage. The starter drive, which most people just refer to as a Bendix, even though Bendix doesn't make this particular one, failed, and it would always do was grind against the flywheel ring gear. So Keith took both starters to a starter guy that he knows, and he checked them out, and he says the 24 volt starter is fine. So of course when we put it back on, like I just told you, we didn't get no fucking 24 volt starter to 24 volt start. So in the meantime, we had the guy check out the 12 volt starter, and he said that the Bendix was just fine, or he fixed it, we don't know. Keith just finished installing it. I'm going to hook up the wires, and we will give the 12 volt starter a try by rewiring the batteries in parallel instead of in series. And we'll see if we can't get it to spin with the 12 volt starter. So we'll turn you on when we start cranking it. Right now, we're going to go back to sleep. Okay, right now Keith is putting the third starter in for the first time. And once we get that in there, we're going to see whether or not we're going to get any fucking results out of this thing. But we've been playing musical starters with this bastard for a month. Okay, we think we have a serviceable starter in this fucker. So, I have had Keith pull a compression release. I have got a fitting loose at the top of the fuel solenoid to see if this thing will pump fuel. And now he's going to see if it cranks. Go ahead and crank it for 20 or 30 seconds. Okay, we got fuel now. You see right in there? You see that wet fitting? We are pumping fuel. So right now we're going to tighten that fitting up and we're going to see if this fucker will start.
Do you want to let our compression release go?
Not yet. Do it after about 10 seconds. That should give time for fuel up into the fuel galleys.
You ready?
Yeah. It's starting to fire a little bit. I'm a little worried about the guy that ran the rack on that fucking thing. It's only running on about 2 cylinders. Not going to hurt anything, but right now I'm going to crank it for a minute. I'm going to try to see if I can hear whether or not it's compressing on all 6 or whether it's, you know, loping over 1 or 2 of them with no compression.
Okay.
You know, it sounds pretty even. Go ahead and turn the key on and see if it'll start. Give it about half throttle and make sure you got your foot all the way down on the clutch and see if it'll start.
That rack ain't right.
Nope. I'm so excited, but I think what we're going to have to do is check that rack and see. We got something that ain't fucking right. You know, we got some injectors that are too tight or some fucking thing. Oh, Jesus. I think I've got all the stuff I need. I'm going to put the camera away until I get a chance to see what I'm going to up against here, because I may have to run the overhead on this fucker.
Boy, I'll tell you what.
Okay, we pulled the Jake brakes off. We ran the overhead. We're going to see if with the compression release it spins smoothly. So go ahead. Now do it. Good. Okay, that's right. Go ahead and start it up. Not bad. No white smoke. We got a Cummins engine that runs the way it's supposed to. We just ran the rack on it. It was all fucked up. Whoever run that fucking rack before was a goddamn bozo. He fucking near destroyed the injectors. I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, I know you can fuck those up, but sure sounds nice now, doesn't it? Okay, well, we were successful in getting 546 to run. I'm happy with it. Now I'm going to adjust the Jacobs brakes, and we'll put the valve covers back on and put the intake back on, and we'll be styling. Talk to you later. Well, there you see 546. Fedderly Marion truck number 546. Under its own power for the first time in a long time. Okay, here he comes. He drove it around the block. You hear that beautiful 855-inch Cummins inline 6. Beautiful sound of spin. It actually works. Smile on that man's face. That man is one of the happiest campers that we've seen in a long time, and he owes me a frickin' beer.
Yes, I do. And just like Jeff Howard, when I went to work for Fedderly Marion, 1985, that's the first truck I drove. And now here we are. Thanks,
yeah,
Jeff.
And it was the first truck I drove in 1971.
So there.
We got some history between us, don't we?
Thank you, Jeff.
All
awesome.
right. Well, we got a runner now.
We got a runner, and it's time
Yeah,
for
we
a
even
cold
woke
adult
Jacob
beverage.
up.
All righty, buddy.
Okay. We'll see you later.
Thank you, sir.